Hey, what's up, guys? Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're having a great day. I hate the way uh, this new YouTube setup is with the lives. Trying to understand why things happen the way they are on this channel, on these lives. But I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna figure it out. And again, appreciate y'all for being in here. Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're having a great day. As you see the title, this is I feel like a very important topic to talk about on this channel. Again, appreciate y'all for being in here. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Hope you're having a beautiful Friday. TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. Thank God it's Friday. But there's a lot of things. A lot of I wouldn't say disorders, but I say issues that a lot of people deal with on a day-to-day basis, as far as their mental health. So many pressures, so many stress factors that people deal with on a daily basis these days. Some things we can control, some things we cannot. You know, some things chemically that we deal with in our bodies that cause us to feel a certain way around certain things. You know, I'll say, people with social anxiety, I think they're the people that don't really want to deal or want to have drama in their life. They don't want to have conflicts in their life. They want to stay away from conflict as much as they can. And so that's why, certain people like myself, I've dealt with social anxiety. We don't want to deal with a lot of pressure. We don't want to deal with a lot of stress. And once we deal with a lot of those things, we kind of go in a corner. We isolate ourselves because, we don't want to deal with a lot of pressure, in life. And so, I just want to do this video to encourage people. You may be dealing with certain social anxiety in your life, and you feel like, you're stuck. You feel like you can't move forward because you have these things in your mind that you can't socialize with people, that you're less than, less than, it's a random girly. How you doing? It's a random girly. How you doing, Hockey King? But a lot of people deal with social anxiety. How you doing, Laura? A lot of people deal with social anxiety. They try to, they feel depressed. I would say they feel depressed because they deal with these issues. They feel like, and I felt like I was less than because, I dealt with those certain issues of social anxiety. How you doing? How you doing? It's a random girly. But there's ways to deal with those types of things. A lot of people deal with social anxiety. They might not tell you. But a lot of people deal with those types of things. Again, appreciate y'all for being in here. But a lot of people deal with those types of things in life. Sometimes you can't control it. Sometimes you can't control it. But you deal with those types of issues in life. So deal with social anxiety. Let me know if you've dealt with it in the chat, that you dealt with social anxiety. Being around people and you feel uncomfortable around people. That's a form of social anxiety. You don't want to be in a lot of events and stuff like that. That's social anxiety. You feel like you're gonna be in a lot of conflicts. You know, but I'll say one thing. You just got to be yourself. I think that kind of helps with social anxiety. I think, uh, especially being in communication or conversation with people. You know, how you doing, guy with a hat? Being in conversation with people, when you have social anxiety, you try to think of the next thing to say in a conversation instead of just being in the conversation. You try to think too much ahead of the conversation, and the conversation doesn't. The conversation is not natural. The conversation is not natural because you're trying to think ahead of the conversation instead of just being in the conversation. You know. But I'll say, number one, just be yourself. Relax, take a breather, and always realize that everybody has their own. Everybody deals with something. Everybody has their shortcomings. And social anxiety may be yours. Social anxiety may be your situation, but I think a lot of creative people, they deal with social anxiety. I've seen artists like SZA. They talk about dealing with these types of anxieties that they deal with in life, and when they get on stage, they're a totally different person because they just love music. But yes, it's a lot of people that deal with social anxiety, but like I said, just be yourself. Try to be in the conversation, not think ahead of the conversation. Sometimes, social anxiety, you feel like you don't know what to say, but just be natural. Be yourself. Sometimes social anxiety, you sweat a lot. I've sweated a lot, as far as having social anxiety. You feel like you're stuck in a situation when you have those types of problems. But just take a breather. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. Never think of yourself less than the person you having a conversation with, because you both can learn from each other. Somebody can always learn from you in life. Always remember that. Don't always think that you have to learn from the other person. Somebody has to learn from you as well. So it's just certain things you have to keep in your mind in order to be relaxed as far as dealing with social anxiety. A lot of people deal with that in life. Sometimes it's tough to deal with. But always keep in mind that you're as good as the next person. You're as important as the next person in life. But again, appreciate y'all for being in here. Appreciate y'all. Hope y'all having a great day. Hope y'all staying inspired. Again, I appreciate y'all for being in here. Let me know who's in here. Let me know who's in here. Again, appreciate y'all for being in here. Hope you're having a great day. Hope y'all staying inspired. Hope y'all staying inspired. But yeah, those are the things, to deal with social anxiety. Just be yourself, be in a conversation. Don't try to think too much in a conversation. Just flow in the conversation. If you don't know an answer, just be honest. Honest. You know, you got to be more honest dealing with social anxiety. You got to be real. You got to be authentic. You know, don't be nobody else but yourself. I've tried in the past, to, be all, this and that in a conversation, and I turn out, my social anxiety flares up. But I just be real. What I deal with, what's my shortcomings, and realizing you don't know everything. You don't know everything about everything, and so just be yourself. But again, appreciate y'all for watching. Please subscribe. All right, peace.